Being that America's foreign politics and relations is such a hot and pivotal issue that we need to get right with the new administration, I feel that just like the next U.S. VP is a nominated position, so is the Secretary of State. Do you have privilege or information that you can share with us about who Obama's Secretary of State might be if he is elected president, and if you will be in his administration as an advisor?
Well, first of all, it is, I don't have any inside information. I think that one of the things about Washington, often there are people who are self-designated next secretaries of state or whatever, which is unfortunate, and they spend more time trying to figure out, how their office is going to look, and one of the privileges when you're Secretary of State, you get to move around the portrait, so you have the people you like closer. But I think one should focus on getting the president elected. What I would hope is that there are people that are being thought about, but honestly, I think that getting this election process is so fascinating and so time-consuming and so intense, I think, for the candidates, that they should focus on that, and the people helping them should focus on that, too. Speaking of portraits, what happened when I was named Secretary of State, I am indeed the first woman Secretary of State, but I also was the last Secretary of State of the 20th century and the first of the 21st, and the only problem was that I started saying it kind of 6 months after Clinton named me. And when I think about it, it was really presumptuous because it made me think that I would stay the whole time. Well, I did, and so I am. But as I was walking to my office, and I walked down this hall that had all the former Secretary of State's portraits up, and they were all white men who only differed from each other as to whether they had mustaches or beards or were clean-shaven. And I thought as I walked down that the walls would shake when my portrait went up. So it's up. They just put it up, and it was a little, the ground moved a bit. But it has, it was wonderful being Secretary of State. And so my final answer to your question is that it is, I believe, the best job for somebody who loves national security and foreign policy. And I've had that, and it doesn't happen twice. I'm the 64th Secretary of State. There have only been 2 other Secretaries of State that have served twice, and that's Daniel Webster and James Blaine. So that's history. I'm happy to be helpful, but I do not expect to have my old job or a job or whatever, What? I'm happy to be an advisor. I have to say that what I really like about Senator Obama is his capability of reaching out for different ideas and having a very large group of people who help. I have said in this book, Memo to the President, that I want to see a confident president rather than a certain president. A confident president is somebody who reads and is curious and who, in fact, likes to have a lot of diverse ideas and respects the people that provide them, and who is somebody who, when in a cabinet meeting or other meeting, not only lets people speak their views, but elicits them in a way, and then goes and makes up his mind based on his own knowledge and principles, but likes that kind of exchange. A certain president doesn't even, is sure of what he knows or doesn't even know what he doesn't know. So I like what I see in Obama is this capability of thinking through really deeply what he believes and the kinds of consideration that he gives to issues, and the fact that those of us that are around him really have the sense that he listens and asks really good questions. So I think it's going to be a wide-ranging group.
Secretary Albright, what are your views about the reasons for and the wisdom of admitting former Soviet republics to NATO?
Well, the issue of NATO enlargement is something that we spent in the Clinton administration a lot of time on, and I think it's kind of a larger question in the following way. Europe was divided artificially at the end of World War II, and the artificial line was maintained for 50 years. And as Jan said, I was born in Czechoslovakia, and in terms of just history, the United States finally figured out kind of what was happening in Central and Eastern Europe from 45 to 48 as one country after another was kind of put behind the Iron Curtain. When the Czechoslovak coup happened in February 48, there really was a sense this has to stop, this is a danger from the Soviet Union, and NATO was created. So it was kind of an interesting circle that at the time I was Secretary of State, NATO was opened up, and we took in Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary, and made very clear that NATO membership was a responsibility and a privilege, and not something that really was something that to be expected, and that there were certain duties that had to be performed. The Soviet Union was put together over a period of years quite artificially. I think not all the republics are the same, and I think countries that are independent should have the right to choose whatever alliance they want to be in. That is the privilege of a democratic, independent country. And the real problem is that somehow the Russians, no matter what we have said, are hard to persuade that NATO is not against them. It is not against them. NATO we worked on this. What was the new mandate of NATO? Soviet Union was gone. What was NATO about? Was it even relevant? And so as we talked about what the NATO mandate was, it began to be called out of area, so that non-NATO members would have some responsibility to go and work in the Balkans, for instance, or now in Afghanistan. That is not anti-Russian. And the thing that I think would be more important is that we figure out ways at various times to cooperate with Russia on common threats. And that they don't have to see NATO as an enemy. But this is not easy. It goes back to the sphere of interest issue, and I think that this is going to be part of the work of trying to persuade them that first of all, a country has to be ready, if you're talking about Georgia and Ukraine and others, because I went around with General Shalikashvili, who had been chairman of the Joint Chiefs, explaining to countries that weren't ready what the problem was, what their relationship was going to be. And we developed this whole thing called Partnership for Peace that allowed countries to train with us and work with us and get ready for NATO membership. And then there was this whole issue of a membership action plan, which is what people are talking about for Georgia and Ukraine. So there's steps to get there. But the main problem is that we have to keep persuading and try to persuade the Russians that this is not against them and that independent countries should be allowed to choose whatever alliance they're in and not have another country dictated.
Madam Secretary, first I'd like to say that your autobiography is fascinating. Not only does it provide an interesting journey about your life, but to really understand the life and the issues, or the times and the issues while you were in the White House. So it was really a wonderful autobiography, and thank you. McCain takes great pride in his knowledge and experience in international affairs. So would you give us the highlights of the philosophical approaches of each of the candidates to foreign policy? Tell us, which candidate do you believe is better equipped to manage it, and why?
Okay. Well, to kind of go back on my remarks, I really do think that we have a very different world in the 21st century. As I was the first secretary of the 21st century. What we were trying to do is to begin to think of it in terms that there had to be different international structures. We had to cooperate in different ways. We talked about different ways to reorganize the State Department, a whole set of issues to really prepare ourselves for what are classically known as global issues or trans-border issues, and whole questions about how you deal with sovereignty and what do you do. Well, take the environment. No matter how strong the U.S. is, we can't deal with the environment by ourselves. So questions about, do we participate in treaties?